Council of State Support to Non-Governmental Organizations under the President of the Republic of Azerbaijan. Difai. One of the most glorious pages in the history of Azerbaijan.
Difai.
Difai started to function at the beginning of the 20th century. As a result of their efforts, the process of resettlement of Azerbaijanis and other Muslims was stopped. Some people know about the activity of the members of Difai, but others do not have any information. Armenians know what Difai is. Armenians know, but we don't. We need to improve ourselves in terms of historical memory. Everything started in the 18th century after Peter I, the Russian emperor, issued a decree about the South Caucasus. There is a document left from Peter I. I got acquainted with this document. There, he recommended that it was important to resettle the Armenians, Assyrians, and other Christian peoples from Iran and Turkey in order to create a buffer in these areas. There were many Armenians. They should be given priority. This process has begun since then. During the reign of Nicholas I, they took some measures to realize this plan and to evacuate Muslim populations from the area. They established Christian settlements near Muslim villages and caused conflicts. In 1890, the Dashnak Tutun Party was formed to give a stronger impetus to this process, and the process was realized more rapidly. However, Armenians have always thought that Russia is behind all of their troubles. At the beginning of the 20th century, Armenian priests openly stated that the Russians wanted to take over the Armenian churches. Cursed be those who will not defend their Armenia, and the time will come when we will have our own kingdom. The priests appealed to the Armenians with these words. During those years, the bloody actions of the Armenian terrorists against Russian officials began with the blessing of the Armenian Church. In 1903, members of the Khimshak Armenian organization severely wounded the chief of the Caucasus, Prince Galitsin, and General Alekhanov, Yelizavetpol's vice-governor Andreev, Baku's governor Nakashidze, and more than 20 officials of the Russian Empire fell victim to Armenian terror. Documents of the Tbilisi police office say that the Armenian Church collected donations, calling these actions sacred work, and threatened those who protested them. The calendar showed February 6, 1905. This was the date of the opening of fire from Baku to the Caucasus.
The murder of an Azerbaijani on the 6th of February was one of the reasons. From 6th to 9th February, there were massacres in Baku. As a result of these massacres, many people were killed on both sides. The Russian government played a provocative role here.
Later, as a chain reaction, they carried out mass acts of terror and violence against the Muslim population in other regions of the South Caucasus. In some places, they even relocated the Muslim population and settled Armenian families there. This process continued throughout 1905 and even into 1906. A long time after the Armenian-Muslim conflict, a Congress was convened in Tbilisi to reconcile the two nations. Vorontsov Dashkov, the governor of Caucasus, 10 to 15 representatives from Azerbaijan, and other representatives from Georgia, Armenia, and other countries attended the Congress. Ahmad Bey Agaev made a speech there. It became clear there that this was all nonsense. Ahmad Bey himself found out that these talks were nonsense and would not yield any results. The main point indicating that the talks would end in failure was that the next rapprochement between the Armenians and the Russian Empire, which began in 1905, continued in 1906. One of the strongest supporters of pro-Armenian policy was Count Vorontsov Dashkov, the governor of the Caucasus.
Not only he, but also his wife, Yelizaveta Andreevna Shuvalova, supported Armenians, and even Duma deputies made speeches there. Chichihidze, a Georgian MP, said that Countess Yelizaveta Vorontsova-Dashkova was completely circled by Armenians. She was respected by the Armenian network. They respected her, gave her presents, and achieved what they wanted with her help. Her influence on her husband was great.
The imperial leadership, with the help of Vorontsov-Dashkov, ordered the Peace Congress to bring peace among parties. Because of the conflict between Armenians and Azerbaijanis seriously shook the economic base of the Russian Empire in the first place. However, the governor did not do what he was ordered. Firstly, he was pro-Armenian, and secondly, he was afraid of Armenians. Ahmed Bey Agaev, who led the Azerbaijani delegation, understood this. At that time, Ahmed Bey Agaoğlu was the editor of the Irshad newspaper and a popular public figure. In one of his speeches, he expressed his thoughts in such a way. Muslims already see that the Tsarist government is afraid of the Jashnaks. The Jashnaks committed terror not only against Muslims, but also against Tsarist officials. The government was helpless in this situation. Ahmed Bey said in such a situation, we, Muslims, should form an organization. We also need a well-established party. We should have our own Jashnak Tutun. Azerbaijanis must respond to this terror with weapons. Hearing these words, Armenian representatives stood up and told the chairman, look, Muslims say they must respond with terror. Ahmed Bey Agaoğlu's speech was already a signal and an expression of an already formed and determined opinion in Azerbaijani society. That Congress was held in March 1906. It was in March after the first Armenian-Muslim dispute. The second Armenian-Muslim dispute began in the summer of 1906, on the 12th of July. Both incidents lasted 5 days. There were many massacres and many casualties. It is true, the casualties were mostly on the side of the Armenians. But we also had some. Armenians did not have a mercy on the elderly, infants, or women. Abdulkarim Bey Mehmandarov, who was considered an elder of Karabakh at the time, sent a telegram to Baku to Caspian newspaper. He wrote about the casualties, how many children became orphans. He asked them for help to bring these orphans together. Having read this telegram, Ahmed Bey Agaev, who was the editor of the paper at the time, took some influential people and went to Shusha, Karabakh. On August 16, 1906, Shusha Governor Galashapov, with several Armenian priests and officers, met Ahmed Bey and other representatives at Ganja Gate of the fortress. Who was Galashapov?
An artillery detachment was sent there. The commander of the artillery detachment was General Galashapov. Galashapov's task was to establish peace in Shusha fortress. But in sea, a completely different picture emerged. His assistant Gazarov was also an Armenian. Klishchinsky and others also patronized the Armenians and armed them. The Azerbaijani people repeatedly tried to take Galashapov out of his post in Shusha, but this did not happen.
For example, many villages of the Javanshir district, villages inhabited by Muslims, were shelled for no reason. From there, the population sent a telegram to Baku informing that they were under attack and being shot at without any guilt. They wrote Armenians opened fire on their villages, but General Galashapov was completely indifferent to it. At that time, there were appeals to remove Galashapov from there completely. Akhund Pishnamazadeh even sent a telegram from Genja to Baku to Haji Zainal Abdin Tagiev, asking Tagiev to address the deputy and ask on behalf of Muslims to remove Galashapov from the post there. The Caucasian deputy rejected the appeals of Haji Zainal Abdin Tagiev, intellectuals, and the people of Karabakh, and supported Galashapov. For this reason, protests against Russia's pro-Armenian policy in Azerbaijani society intensified. Galashapov saw a real threat in the example of Ahmed Bey Agaev. Therefore, trying to anticipate the events the next day on August 18th, he, together with Armenian and Russian representatives, arrived in the city square with white flags in their hands. After long negotiations, the Azerbaijanis forgave Galashapov. Thus, the Second Armenian Muslim Massacre in Shusha ended. Galashapov knew that the Azerbaijanis would definitely take revenge on him for his betrayals. On the night of August 30th, Galashapov fled to Tbilisi with his bodyguards. Ahmad Bey Agaev, who remained in Shusha, held an emergency secret meeting. There was a man called Mukhtar Gaytaranoglu. The meeting was held in his house on August 30th, 1906. Ahmad Bey announced the establishment of the party and said that the first members were those who took part in this meeting. Ahmed Bey Agaev, Azerbaijani intellectual, one of the prominent representatives of the Enlightenment movement in the early 20th century. He got his first education in Shusha. In 1888, Ahmad Bey Agaev, who entered Sorbonne Law School, also wrote articles in the French press. His lectures in the field of Oriental studies were translated into many European languages. Ahmad Bey, who returned to his homeland in 1894, began to teach French at a real school in Shusha. At the invitation of philanthropist Haji Zainal Abdin Tagayev, he came to Baku and began to work for the Caspian newspaper, and for some time until 1904, wrote hundreds of articles on Azerbaijani literature, culture, and sociocultural activities. In 1905, he was the editor of the newspaper Hayat. Later, he issued the papers Irshad, Karagi, and the paper Progress in the Russian language. During this period, he joined the active political struggle. He was a strong humanist and peace-loving man. However, the realities of the time had a serious impact on Ahmed Bey's views. Therefore, at the first meeting in Shusha, he explained the need to create a secret organization. We are facing unexpected danger. My dear compatriots, you probably know very well how important and crucial Shusha is for all Caucasian Turks. Shusha is an impregnable fortress. If it is lost here, we will have no choice but to take our children across the Araz. The future of the Muslims of Transcaucasia is uncertain. Knowing that the Russians can do all kinds of evil with the help of Armenians, we must reunite the people and fight against the Russian government. Or rather, we must frighten the Russians and tell them that we will not be easily ruined. We need to create a secret organization for this purpose. The next speaker was Abdulkarim Bey Mehmandarov. He was a professional doctor. He studied at St. Petersburg Academy of Medical Surgery during the years 1872 to 1877. He was the first Azerbaijani to receive a higher medical education and a doctorate. In the last decade of the 19th century, he worked as a village and district doctor in the Shusha district. At the beginning of the 20th century, he took an active part in the prevention of the spread of the plague that engulfed Karabakh. In 1905 and 1906, during the Jashnak's fight against the civilian population in Shusha, Dr. Mehmandarov led the defense. At a meeting held at the house of Mukhtar Bey, Abdulkarim Bey blamed the policy of the Russian Empire for all the troubles. So far, we have been loyal to the Russian government. In return for this loyalty and trust, the Russians, led by General Galashapov, joined forces with the Armenian Dashnaks and opposed us. They demolished our houses, mosques, burned the buildings of the princes, and destroyed our palace pearls, leaving thousands of people starving. Relations between Muslims and Russians have deteriorated in recent days. Many Russian villagers living among Muslims say that we used to be in agreement with Muslims, but now they don't want to speak to us. Who is to blame? Of course, the Russians themselves, the government, their own authorities are guilty of it. They were mainly people studying abroad. They were truly intellectuals. They formed the organization Difai. It was a closed organization. The organization functioned very actively. The decision of creating an organization was made in Shusha. This organization had to struggle against the Armenians, as well as the Tsarist officials who supported the Armenians. They could realize this idea in Baku between August through September. According to archival documents, in September 1906, the All-Caucasian Muslim Difai Committee was established in Baku. The Difai organization was already being established not only in Karabakh, but also in other regions. For example, it was formed in Ganja. In Ganja, the local leaders of that committee were Akhund Pishnamazadeh and Alakber Bey Rafibeyev. Later, it was formed in the Gazakh district. Haji Karim Sarnalı became the chief of the local branch. Gradually, the centers of this party were formed in many parts of the Caucasus, in Zengezur, Tbilisi, Yelizavetpol, etc. This was an indication that they managed to establish their own organizations and centers in all regions where the Armenian Muslim massacres took place.
It had to be an organization with the ability to fight. Secondly, it had to be an educational organization, not just the military one. It's clear from the name of the organization that it was created to protect the people. Of course, to protect the people did not mean only to arm them. When writing the program of the Difai party, its organizers first of all intended to educate the people.
In the program of Difai, two sides were warned. The first was the government of the Russian Empire. On the one hand, it is to give life to the nation by enlightening them, and on the other hand, to save the nation by force from enemies and traitors of the government, as well as traitors and leaders who do not care about the nation. The Difai sect will use bombs and daggers to incite them to justice, neutralism, and fairness. The second warning of the Difai was addressed to the Armenians, to the Dashtun party, namely. Our main goal is to establish a real brotherhood with all the nations of the Caucasus. If the Dashtun party reaches out to us sincerely and honestly to show their intentions, and if this intention is in line with the happiness of the Caucasus and the rights and authority of the tribes over liberation, we are ready to work with them. However, if the Dashtun continues its crooked policy and attacks only weak Muslims, then they will face a severe defense, and bloody squares will occupy the whole Caucasus. Because we, the Difai sect, will not accept that Armenians could own our national lands and create prosperity for themselves in our ruins. This document is very interesting from the point of view of both history and source studies. We have another declaration of the Difai party published in Russian. When comparing these documents, we find out a very interesting detail. The declaration in Russian is written in a more radical, stricter way, but the program published in Irshad is relatively liberal. There was a note on behalf of the editorial office at the end of the program published in Irshad. They wrote that they had not published the full text of the program. They had abbreviated it because there were some harsh words against government officials. In this way, Ahmad Bey Ağaoğlu tried to ensure himself, because he knew that if the program was published as it was, it would lead to the closure of the newspaper in the future. However, when we look at the Russian text of the program in the archives, we see that there are extremely harsh words against both Vorontsov-Dashkov and Galashapov. They are criticized there. It clearly states that Armenians gave them bribes, Armenians manipulated them, and massacred the Muslim population with their help. On November 8, 1906, shortly after the Difai party spread its program, it carried out its first act of revenge. General Galashapov was killed by 2 shots in Tbilisi. The members of the Difai in Shusha sent declarations to several newspapers in Baku and Tbilisi and claimed responsibility for the action. Thousands of homeless, vagrant people of devastated Zangezur, Shusha, Jabrayil, and Javanshir provinces will now find at least some comfort in this bright world. However, the act of revenge is not over yet. After the general, it is the time to take revenge on his clerk, the bribe taker, the worthless Klashinsky, the drunk Smorodsky, Mickiewicz, those who destroyed Zangezur, and everyone who betrayed Muslims. Long live Difai! Death to all the executioners and traitors of the people.
The act committed against General Galashapov put an end to all robbers in Shusha in about a few days. This meant that they only understood the violence and such criminal acts. After this act, the situation calmed down.
The secret police of the Russian Empire made efforts to arrest Difai members. It would have been impossible to achieve this goal without betrayal because Difai had well covered their secret activities. In the autumn of 1906, an organization called the Central Committee for Assistance to Victims in Yelizavetpol province was established in Baku. Haji Zainalabdin Tagiev led the committee. All members of the committee were in contact with the Difai party. Some were even members of it. They were able to disguise their activities as a kind of committee so that the government would not pay much attention to what the defenders were actually doing. For example, one of the most prominent members of the Difai, Akhundov Pishnamazadeh, was also a member of that committee. Whenever a traitor was sentenced to death by Genge, Baku, Nakhchivan, Karabakh, or Kazakh branches of the Difai, the decision was enforced immediately. For 3 years, not any Azerbaijani or Muslim in the Caucasus was hurt on national grounds. It was not only against the Armenians, but also to prevent the actions of the Russians and others against our people. According to police reports, funds were raised in Genge for the purpose of weapons with direct participation and organization of Alakbar Bey Rafibeyev, Alakbar Bey Hasmamadov, Khalil Bey Hasmamadov, and Akhundov Pishnamazadeh. It even states that a special tax was imposed on the population, which was collected and then used to buy weapons. Interestingly, archival sources also mention Haji Zainalabdin Tagiev in connection with Difai. Police reports state that Haji Zainalabdin Tagiev provided financial support to Difai in Baku. It was, of course, the acquisition of weapons. This was the most important thing here. The acquisition of weapons was very important to respond to the Armenian terror. One of the most powerful weapons of the Difai sect was enlightenment. Difai sent teachers to the regions to educate their illiterate compatriots. The situation reached such a point that in his letters to St. Petersburg, Vorontsov Dashkov, the deputy from Tbilisi, did not hide his surprise and concern at the rapid rise in the level of knowledge of Azerbaijanis.
In each province, they took over all the executive and judicial powers. When the villagers complained about the landowner, they went to the Difai party branch. They did not go to the mullahs, to the Sharia court, or to the Russian court. The Russian government was very, very devoted because they realized that they were losing power. The Difai party was slowly taking over all the provinces. Difai became very popular among people. From 1906 to 1908, Difai took control of almost all provinces in Azerbaijan, especially in the north and west. Its organizations were very active everywhere.
The growing popularity of Difai among the population began to worry the empire. The secret police began to mobilize the entire network. In 1907, for the first time, the police searched the house of Ahmad Ağaoğlu. It is true that they could not find anything. However, the reason for this inspection was related to Difai. The agency already had information that Ağaoğlu was the leader of the organization. In 1908, the police inspected his house again. The pressure from the other side forced Ahmad Bey Ağaoğlu to leave Baku and Azerbaijan in general and emigrate to the Ottoman Empire. In 1909, the activity of Difai was suspended. However, the heritage, national thinking, and national idea created by this party for 3 years played a crucial role in the future of the Azerbaijani people. Difai became the first national party to lead the national liberation movement in Azerbaijan. Members of Difai were one of the founders of this movement. Difai proved that this nation is capable of both using force and enlightenment to defend itself. In other words, Difai demonstrated the ability of the nation to organize. Tsarist Russia, unlike Armenians and other Christian nations, deprived Azerbaijanis of military service and treated them as unreliable. That is why, while the Russian army has a large number of Armenian servicemen, the number of Azerbaijani servicemen is very small. Difai made a great contribution to the military organization of the nation by forming the national military units. It is a historical fact that in the early 20th century, Difai was able to prevent the occupation of the Azerbaijani lands by Armenians, who did not have their own lands. It was Difai which prevented the attacks of Armenian terrorist groups on Azerbaijani villages and the killing of innocent civilians there. Despite persecution and pressure after 1909, the members of Difai did not refrain from struggling for freedom and independence in Azerbaijan. The Difai approach existed before World War I and even after the February Revolution of 1917. According to Turkish historical sources, Aslan Khan Khoyski, the nephew of Fatali Khan Khoyski, who was the authorized representative of the former Difai, crossed the border during the military operations on the Caucasus Front and came to the headquarters of Anvar Pasha in Erzurum in February 1915. The purpose of this visit was to get guarantees from the representatives of Turkey and Germany for the establishment of an independent republic, independent of both Russia and Turkey. The republic was supposed to cover the territories of Baku, Yelizavetpol, and Yerevan provinces, Dagestan, and Terik districts. The followers of Difai took an active part in the formation of armed groups in Genge in 1917. Within 2 months, with the help of the military units of Difai, Genge National Committee was able to disarm the 218th and 219th Russian regiments stationed in the city. Soon, the Russians had to leave the city. The people who led the Difai party saw the way out in the restoration of the independent Azerbaijani statehood. The party's influence on the processes and public opinion in the region increased so much that Difai was prepared to take the first steps toward the establishment of the first Turkish state in the South Caucasus. Relying on the power of the nation and the people, Difai members literally became the backbone of everyone. Difai members who took an active part in the establishment of the Azerbaijan Democratic Republic began to realize the ideas of freedom, prosperity, a just society, defense, and enlightenment that they had all had in their minds and hearts for years. Replacement epilogue. In 1949, the Dashnak Tutun party held a secret meeting in Tehran, where Armenians compiled a list of prominent personalities of Azerbaijan who were members of the Difai party in 1906 through 1909. These are the names on this list: Ahmad Bey Agaoğlu, Abdülkerim Bey Memandarov, Ahund Molla Pishnamazadeh, Mamadoğlu Khan Javanshir, Muhtar Bey Gaziyev, Khudush Guliyev, Zulfigar Hakverdiyev, Hacı Mirgasim Hamzayev, Salah Huseynov, Javad Bey Gaziyev, Şükür Bey Kazimbeyev, Mirza Cemal Yusufzadeh, Alasker Bey Hasmamadov, Hamid Bey Usubeyev, Mashhadi Ali Hacı Mamad Hüseyin Rafiyev. Project Manager, Rada Abbas. Screenwriter and Director, Etibar Mamadov. Camera, Ramin Shabazov. Editor, Bulur Mamadova. Consultant, Elmadin Beybud. Montage, Arzu Aslanov. Color, Eltun Aliyev. Sound Director, Atam Nabioglu. Archivist, Narmin Suleimanli. Literature used, Eldar Azizov, Difai, Initial Historical Conditions and Causes of the Armenian-Azerbaijani Conflict in the early 20th Century. Farhad Jabarov, Ahmad Bey Agaoğlu, National Issue in the Caucasus, a collection of articles and documents. Vasif Guliev, The Memandaros, video from public television and Khazar TV were used in this documentary film. The documentary was made by Vatan TV Media Group